Hello, everyone. I'm Darrell Proctor, Senior Associate Editor for Power Magazine, and I'd like to welcome you to this session, How to Accelerate the Adoption of Electrification. I'll be the moderator for today's discussion. Today's session is being recorded and will be available to watch on demand after the program. If you have questions for our panelists, please submit them in the Q&A tab, which you can find at the right side of your screen. We plan to take 10 to 15 minutes to answer questions after today's discussion. Note that your questions will be sent privately, visible only to our panelists and not to the general audience. With that, I'd like to introduce today's panelists who will discuss how to accelerate the adoption of electrification. I'd like to welcome Klaus Avasjo, Executive Director of ZAPI Group, Gareth Jones, Managing Director at ZAPI UK, Paolo Patroncini, Founder and CEO of 4E Consulting, and Sarah McKinnon, co-CEO and CFO of Delta Q Technologies. With that, we'll kick off our conversation. We're going to start with Klaus. Can you talk about the current state of electrification across ZAPI Group's key industries?
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Let me start a little bit of what I call our core business. So we are coming out from material handling lift trucks, and today roughly 1.5 million lift trucks are produced every year. And if you look at the electrification, it has been moving on quite well. So today, 70% of the forklifts are electric globally. And you can see some differences in different regions. So roughly 90% electric in Europe and 65% in Americas and Asia Pacific. Another historical core market for us has been golf carts. They are roughly electrified, 80% of them. And then we, of course, have been supporting moving into what we call new markets. And 2013, we were together with the big OEM launching a hybrid electric city bus. And of course, that was very small volumes, incentivized in different regions, city buses, but gradually growing. So today you can see that truck and bus is really ready to go electric and starting to have available vehicles, delivery trucks for distribution. I guess long haul will take longer, and we will probably talk a little bit about why it's not really ready yet. And then we can see some fast adoption markets. We have, for example, auto power equipment, which came on very quickly, light electric EVs, electric scooters, especially in Asia. And in the trade show Bauma 2022, the construction equipment companies were showing many different applications, electrified, ready to go, electric wheel loaders, excavators, and basically all compact machines were ready to go electric. Maybe I stop here and we hand it over to you, Darrell, and we will see where we go next.
Thanks for that, Klaus. Gareth, I want to send this over to you right now. What are some of the main drivers of electrification strategies for businesses?
Okay. Well, first of all, hello, everybody. So, of course, the drivers towards electrification are an important starting point when any business leader is trying to define their strategy moving forward. And there are many different drivers, and these drivers are variable in different markets and variable in different regions. So this makes it quite a complicated environment for business leaders to have to navigate through in order to define their strategy. But I've got a couple of quite generic drivers, which I think are applicable to most people involved in the electrification industry. So I'll just go through a few of those. So first of all, environmental regulations. So the world's trying to reduce the amount of CO2 which is being produced, and electrification is one of the most important and key tools to enable this reduction in the CO2 which is being produced. So therefore, this is a really important driver and is probably the big driver driving electrification globally in most markets. So we've also got, again, this is dependent on region and dependent on the timing, but government incentives are driving electrification, particularly in some regions. But so the government incentives are there to give a kickstart to the electrification, particularly where there's a financial challenge to overcome at the start. So these incentives really are there to just get things moving. But that is enough to drive the markets to start with, you can say. An important factor to also consider is the consumer demand. It drives these markets as well as all markets. I would say there's a greater amount of green awareness globally, and people are becoming more familiar and comfortable with electric vehicles of all sorts because we see them everywhere now. And so the consumer demand is growing and pushing. And something which is helping that also is the fact that we're now seeing more options regarding electric machines and electric vehicles. So this increase in the amount of options is making the consumer decision easier. And this again is a positive feedback cycle, pushing up that consumer demand. A couple of other things, we have corporate social responsibility. So as I touched on earlier, there's a global push to reduce CO2. And for organizations who want to proceed ethically, at the corporate level, they are thinking about electrification as a way to achieve this goal, because you can get your green badge using electrified vehicles in a good way. So that's an important driver, I would say. Another thing is technology is advancing, and each time, usually when a technology is advancing, we're seeing it's helping the cause of electrified vehicles, because a lot of advancements now might be around battery technology, which is helping to get rid of range anxiety, or around AI or IT, so that the user experience and the interface with the equipment is becoming more enjoyable and user-friendly for the end user. So this is, technology is really helping the drive towards electrification. The last comment I was going to, the last driver that I was going to touch on is market competition. So at least in all of the markets where we are involved with, pretty much everyone, particularly all of the big players, are electrifying their machines. And the knock-on effect of this is their competitors are seeing what they are doing. So this is driving the market forward also. So people are definitely following suit. I mentioned also that there's a big regional differential between these drivers. They're all valid in one degree or another in each region, but some regions focus more on specific drivers. So if we think about Europe, for example, the EU has very stringent emission standards. And so this will really drive businesses to focus on electrification as a way to achieve these emissions regulations. Like, for example, Euro 7 is very challenging to meet. So electrification is a way to enable that moving forward. We also have a lot of government incentives in Europe, particularly in the quite an early adopter of government incentives in order to give a kickstart to these particular industries. In the UK, we had quite a lot of help given to the bus market to push low emissions vehicles. And that was a really relevant aspect which helped move in that direction, the market in general. Just one thing as well, I see particularly in Europe, is the consumer choice. And this is more longer term, but a lot of companies who I speak to, and a lot of companies in general, they are actually longer term, they are looking to only make electric vehicles. So this, I think, is going to reduce the consumer choice long term, but in the other respect, whereas maybe electric is the only option in the future for certain applications. Another area which I'm particularly involved with is India, and government incentives there are really driving the electrification. Klaas touched on it earlier, and in India we have the FAME scheme. The third phase of this is about to be released, but OEMs and OEMs really are closely watching what the FAME scheme means, and that is driving their business decisions very directly, because the incentivization is key in that area for the success of their particular market. So that's really a strong, specific situation for India. For example, also in the US, we have a different scenario. I was going to ask Sarah, being as she's in North America, a bit closer there to me, if you could say a little bit about the specifics of that area.
Sure. Thanks, Gareth, and good morning and good afternoon to everybody on the call today. Yes, in both the US and Canada, we do see similar both standards coming through in terms of emissions targets and incentive programs to really help businesses that in these markets turn to electrification. So in August 2022, President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act. This was the most significant piece of action that the government has taken ever to fight climate change. This program included $369 billion of funding for energy and climate change and for the development of clean energy products. So just an example that's very close to our space at the ZAPI Group. There's $1 billion of grants and rebates available for replacing Class 6 and 7 commercial vehicles to zero emission. So you can see globally, governments are first of all putting in restrictions on emission or emission targets, but also providing incentive programs to enable that conversion to electric. Thanks, Gareth.
Thanks, Sarah. So this incentivization is clearly gathering pace everywhere, and them actions in the US are really huge and really give a clear indication of the direction of travel which the US is going in. And being a world leader, leading economy, that all goes to back up the argument that we're all heading in one direction, and it's electric. So I was going to also just touch on China, where I think there's an interesting different dynamic in China, which could be a factor. That being, they have an abundance of raw materials which seem to fit well with the electrification market, lithium for batteries and rare earth magnets for motors. So this is probably part of the reason why China is really leading the way when it comes to the number of electrification applications which it's already realized. So they have this abundance of local resource, which they're obviously capitalizing on. Okay, so that was my little bit on that.
Thanks for that, Gareth, and thanks to you, Sarah, for your insight. I wanted to throw this open to the entire panel. What are the primary barriers that industries face when it comes to adopting electrification? And Paolo, we haven't heard from you yet, so maybe you can start here.
Okay, good. Well, about the barriers to enter into the electrification, first of all, I would say that the first barrier probably is due to the cultural approach, cultural mindset. In fact, if we consider that, for example, in Europe, based on several studies for the commercial vehicles, more than 86% of the commercial vehicles, of the electrical commercial vehicles, are already capable to cover the normal range expected for this. But normally, due to poor communication, this is not very easy to be shared, and people does not know this. So this is a first approach. The barrier is first of all a cultural barrier. Moreover, the technology is also very much mature, not only for commercial vehicle, but for construction, for many different market sectors. The electrical technology is mature, but sometimes very often the infrastructure is not aligned to cover these needs. For example, now, of course, the passenger cars infrastructure charging system is improving year by year, and most of the for example the construction equipment systems are adopting the infrastructure that are already in place for the passenger car, for example. Also the missing the absence of a commonized standard for the electrification. We unfortunately we face that agricultural market as a standard, construction as another one, and so on. So most of them are converging to the automotive standard, but sometimes is not well applicable. As a third aspect is the cost. Again, apparently the purchasing cost of an electrical machine is higher than the traditional one. But and this is not only apparently, this is also real. But often people are scared about the initial cost because they are not considering the total cost of ownership, because they are not considering the maintenance, the overhauling, and so on, which makes a great difference. And in ZAPI Group, we are trying to disseminate this culture in supporting the partners, having this, I would say, extended culture in order to better understand what is the real total cost.
Thanks for that, Paolo. Klaus, I'll throw this back to you. I know in the run-up, we talked about technical expertise, and particularly in emerging markets, and in the people that you work with. How do you go about talking with them about the expertise that's needed, in specific markets to adopt electrification?
So our big OEM customers are mechanical engineers and experts in transferring the power from a diesel engine through transmission gearbox to the axle and the wheel. And when you electrify, you have to be able to discuss out of the electric motor, adding on power electronics, power distribution, batteries, battery management. So we have to help and guide our customers in this discussion to size the system. And they're going to be a big transition for the big OEMs to build up this knowledge about the electric system, and not just for the design, but also for the aftermarket and service. So I think that's one piece we are seeing. And if you think about barriers, I think Paolo, you touched on it, but one of it has been the cost of the components, of course, and the cost of batteries coming down. It's helping. Also the other power electronics and electric motors. It's helping to justify the business case over time. And then. Well, maybe I stop here and let someone else in as well.
I'll throw this over to Gareth, because I know in the UK there is a lot of innovation that's happening around electrification, and the government has got behind a lot of these projects. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on there?
Yeah, so the UK government, they have a lot of available money actually to help support businesses with electrification projects. These can be very useful because not only do they financially support the development activity, they bring businesses together to collaborate in teams, so that know-how about electrification is getting spread to the wider market, which is from a networking point of view valuable and useful. And yeah, a lot of new companies are appearing, which are benefiting from these government grants, if you like. You have to make an application in order to win, so you compete. It's basically a competition where you put forward your proposal of what you want to do and what the benefits will be, and particularly how that will then benefit the UK in general. And yeah, we've been involved with some of those, and yeah, they're very useful and interesting.
Sarah, can you talk about, from the North American viewpoint, touch on what's happening? I know you mentioned the IRA, and I know that one of the things that a lot of businesses have dealt with, particularly in the United States, where I'm located, is trying to figure out exactly what tax credits they can qualify for, and kind of reading through the fine print of all this. Can you talk about, in the discussions you have with clients, the difficulties that they might have in kind of understanding what's actually available out there to help them?
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking of that in terms of the barriers, and you know, these barriers really do vary in the nature of the industry or the equipment manufacturer. The difference between some of these kind of traditional markets that have been electric for some time versus really an onslaught of emerging electrification. So, and yes, there is funding available. We've talked about a number of these programs, but kind of navigating through that funding can be a challenge. And really, it's about just following what Gareth was saying. It's really about bringing the organizations together and different teams together to kind of understand what are the nuances of the particular funding and how to access it. And then come back to prove that the total cost of ownership makes sense. So it's kind of knocking down all these different barriers and putting a package together. And it's you know, within the ZAPI group, in terms of how we can help, this is part of what we need to work towards, right? Is offering kind of a solution that leverages the funding, the technology, points out total cost of ownership. But yes, I mean, these various funding programs, they're all different, and it can be a challenge to kind of navigate through them.
Thanks for that, Sarah. And Paolo, I'm going to come back to you, because ultimately the question here is, what is the ZAPI group doing to accelerate electrification?
ZAPI Group ZAPI Group strategy is based on about how to accelerate the electrification is based on some pillars, like driving the education and further technology, product development, and these are in particular the key area where strategically we want to work, because you know, the electricity is the most universal and easy to control type of energy, and so it can be generated using also modern technology, and therefore in the complete life cycle is could be easily closed. I would say that we are as ZAPI Group engaged to support the customers, which becomes our partner, who wants to enter into the electrification with a sort of holistic approach. So we are promoting together with the partner the research and the development to improve the product. There is a side-by-side work with our partners in developing the products and develop our product together with their one. And in this way, we are explaining them there is not only an environmental advantage, but also we are providing the experience to begin a new path into the electrification. So basically, the focus for most of them are to decarbonize their industrial system, their vehicle, their machine, whatever it is. How to get this decarbonization in a sustainable way. So this is what we are doing. How to convert and switch from using the fossil fuel power to the electrified power system, which in this way we can also, as I mentioned before, develop new product and improve our product together. So one of the key which is enabled to smooth and to convert, the facilitate the conversion from conventional vehicle to an electrified one is, and this is let me talk about the presence of 4E Consulting. This is the sort of the integrational approach. So what does it mean, system integration? We joined the 4E we as 4E joined ZAPI Group in 2022, and with 4E on board, ZAPI Group in some way changed the paradigm from being a pure component supplier to a sort of service provider, no? So in other words, we have the mission to drive the customer, which is our partner, into the electrification, giving him not only a product but a complete system, which is, for example, mechanical integration or communication or whatever. And this is letting me jumping back to your question. So, which is what's the focus on ZAPI Group to accelerate the electrification? Is basically, as Gareth said before, to mitigate the entry barriers. No.
And Gareth, can you touch a little bit on the importance of knowledge transfer and education and training that ZAPI Group is doing to help accelerate electrification?
Yes, sure. Firstly, just to reinforce a little bit Paolo's comment, I think particularly now that we're moving into new markets, or new markets are now starting to electrify and needing our support. So ZAPI Group's core, ZAPI Group's backbone is these very strong standalone product companies. So in well-established markets like the forklift market we was in before, they have developed their expertise in-house so that they can buy individual products and do the systems integration themselves. But now when we move into new markets, exactly as Paolo just explained, the OEMs don't have that know-how. So we can really help them with that. And that's why now ZAPI Group is kind of changing the focus a little bit to also focus more on the systems integration and the system support so the customers can benefit. And we're really focusing as well as that to try to share the know-how which is developed over a very long time, decades. ZAPI Group has developed this know-how within its product companies. And now we're doing things to try to support from a system point of view and share this know-how with the customers, with our customers. So something we do a lot with OEMs who are moving into electrification, we try to set up training sessions with them where we give them the benefit of our know-how, because we all want the same thing. We want their electrified vehicles to be successful in the market. And we know a lot of the hurdles which they will have to face in the future going through these developments. So yeah, we can really be a value add for them, not only because of our very strong product know-how, but also from our new and increasing system know-how. Yeah, we can be a big value add to our customers.
So in
terms of, I was just gonna. Oh, sorry, Darrell.
No, go ahead, Sarah.
I was going to add one comment to that. I mean, really, as we shift towards these emerging markets that are looking to electrify their equipment, to leverage these incentive programs or respond to the end user demand, it's about offering solutions versus kind of more historically, we've offered these commodities as you spoke about. So it's a solutions-based approach. The acquisition of 4E as into the ZAPI family is part of that in terms of the systems integration view and really about offering a solution, the training, and the whole package.
So I was going to mention there, and that kind of ties into this, finding solutions. A lot of times that will involve giving ideas about new technologies and product development. Whoever would like to discuss maybe what ZAPI Group is doing in that area.
Yeah, maybe I can touch on one thing before I answer that. But what I would like to say is that we're trying to build up an ecosystem of solutions where we are not the only supplier. So if you take the electric motor, we need to make sure it fits together with the transmission. If we take the electric motor, it has to fit together with the hydraulics, and we need to size the system. We need to have a portfolio of different components available for different applications, from low voltage 24 volt up to 900 volt high power systems. And we work very closely with the battery community, so we can make sure that we are charging the batteries correctly to the right cycle, protect them for the life cycle. So I think this full ecosystem is on continuous development, but it's to support the system integration.
And one of the things we also had discussed earlier was about being proactive. Can any of you touch on what for ZAPI Group, what that means in terms of being proactive?
I can say that we like to have an eye on the future, particularly with this very dynamic electrification world which we see at the moment. So we really do have to keep an eye on the future, otherwise it'll come up and slap you in the face and you're too late. So with that in mind, we're really focused on automation. So we've added automation into our portfolio, because electrification and automation are two key things for the future of planet Earth, you can say. And there's quite a symbiotic relationship between the two technologies. So we're investing into that area. And also, we have to be on the front foot with a lot of R&D and innovation, because technology is moving fast. So we have to move fast as well to keep one step ahead.
In discussions that you have with customers, do you talk about how important it is in terms of timing to make sure that they can get incentives that they're eligible for?
I think in some ways it's a bit of both, right? In some markets, say in India, for example, and Gareth can add to this as well. I mean, some of the incentive programs like the FAME have really led to businesses outside of India moving into India, for example. So in some cases, I think the incentives lead the initiatives, and in other cases, the incentives follow. I mean, it really varies by kind of country, program, and market. But it's definitely a bit mixed.
Yeah, I always feel that if you're doing it because of the incentive, there's more risk. So I like to think that the best idea is that the incentivization is a helping hand towards something which you should be doing anyway, because then you have the risk of, when the incentive stops, is it still a commercially viable thing that you're doing? But that's just my point of view.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think the related driver is government regulation,
Yeah.
right? So, and those go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So, I mean, governments are really led by Europe,
Stick and carrot.
really developing more and more policies towards emission reduction in response to climate. And so business is responding, and that's what the ZAPI Group is doing in terms of enabling companies to meet these targets.
and this
Paolo,
is,
did you have something you wanted to add there?
yeah, this is another aspect where normally we are, as 4E, we are directly involved. To catch the right timing, it means, especially for the incentives, it means to present an electrified product, an electrified machine in a short time. So not only the time to market, but the time to present a project which is sustainable from a business standpoint, from a technological standpoint, and reliability and so on. And so this is a typical system integration exercise, no? Providing this, it means that the OEM, normally I would say the smallest OEM, which does not have the technology inside, they can have a sort of shortcut to catch the right timing.
So one of the big things, obviously, with anything involving electrification, when a business is looking to adopt electrification, move away from fossil fuels, how does the adoption of electrification principles and technologies impact business outcomes and profitability? Sarah, I'll go to you with this one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the good news is that evidence is showing that companies that are participating in these types of initiatives are realizing better bottom line results. And there's a number of factors. So Klaus spoke earlier about kind of the market we're in with kind of lowering costs of inputs like batteries, for example. But also what's happening is the market itself is demanding this kind of perspective, investments in carbon reduction, etc., and rewarding companies that are following this path. So they're being rewarded in the market. They have more access to funds, more access or better access to leverage or different debt. So, and as a result, they're realizing improved profitability over time. So that's positive news. So enabling electrification does contribute to your bottom line in a positive way.
And I'll ask Klaus, when businesses are coming to ZAPI Group, where does that fall in the discussion? Is that one of the first things that they like to ask? Like, how is this going to help my business's bottom line?
No, I think I don't think so. I think it's more coming out what Gareth talked about, the user needs. And I think that's where they start. And that's also where regulation and incentive programs comes out of, the needs from, it could be cities or countries or, other environment needs that drives electrification, I think.
One thing we are seeing, though, Darrell, is our large OEM customers are demanding this kind of ESG approach to beyond the product, right? So it's becoming a must-have in terms of a perspective within a business versus a nice-to-have, and we're seeing that across the broader ZAPI Group in terms of what our customers need from all of their suppliers.
And Gareth, can you touch on what this means in terms of economic growth in the job market? I don't know, in the UK, I don't know how many jobs are tied to cleaner energy projects, but I think we could look at this really globally and also regionally. But can you speak for the UK and perhaps maybe even the India perspective?
Okay, yeah. So for sure, well, I think one first comment on that is there's always seems to be globally a shortage of the trained and skilled people in engineering in general. So I think this is actually a bit of a barrier in some cases for us for some OEMs moving forward, just getting the technical resource in place. But the pool of focusing on the UK, of course, there's a huge demand for people who have the skills and the know-how around these new greener technologies. So good for people who have them skills because they're in high demand. And for example, I'm strongly encouraging my children to follow in that direction because these kind of skills will be valuable for each country in the future, so it can be good for them. But then I think there is more to be done by governments to encourage people down this path in colleges and universities, because we don't, in the UK and, well, also I think it's pretty global, even in India. Because in India, to focus on that place, because they have relatively a huge resource of engineering graduates. But even now, with the uplift of activities around electrification in India, there's the supply and demand situation around staff is even a bit strained there. So I think, yeah, as I said, governments need to try to push more for the young people to move into these industries.
Sarah, I wanted to ask you, you're in British Columbia, and I know obviously the oil and gas industry has been a big driver of the economy in Western Canada. But what are you seeing now in terms of the clean energy economy and the workforce and what's happening there?
No, that's a great point. There's been a real shift. I actually was in a meeting with a local minister for British Columbia just last week and talking about that exact shift of jobs with a kind of changing end user demand. And within British Columbia now, 15% of our entire workforce is within the clean technology sector. And that's really from zero, just a few years ago, kind of broadly speaking. So we are creating kind of a clean technology hub within British Columbia where Delta Q is located. And that part of the economy is growing 2 times faster than the rest of the economy. So it is a real opportunity for employment. And it has been a real shift over the last kind of years and decade as we continue to focus. And our government, Gareth, is quite actively involved in this because it is a creator of jobs. And there is a lot of pressure on oil and gas, as you can imagine. So we are seeing some movement there, which is very positive. Again, some of these hoops and confusing plans and things like we discussed earlier, but definitely seeing focus on this area and an opportunity for continued investment.
Good.
So this is a question that we can all talk about and could probably talk about for a long period of time, but how do you foresee the impact of electrification on businesses over the next 5 to 10 years? And Klaus, I'll start with you.
Well, one topic we haven't discussed so much yet is the charging infrastructure. So I think that's important that government invest and support the infrastructure and build it up. And we could see with the energy crisis in Europe because of the war that there are other reasons also to maybe invest into electric power solutions. And there's big debate in Sweden about nuclear, for example, small SMRs to build it up and to support. And I think it's also in other countries. And so that's probably an area of investments, but which it's a little bit out of control for us, but need to happen to be so electrification can successfully move on, I guess.
You mentioned small modular reactors, and I know there's literally, while there's a lot of innovation happening in that sector and a lot of research and development, there's actually only 2 SMRs that are in commercial operation worldwide right now. There is a lot of talk about nuclear power and how nuclear could help electrification because it's a zero emission technology. Gareth, I know the UK just came out with a new nuclear policy, I think last week or 2, or sometime in the past couple of weeks. Can you talk a little bit about, how nuclear could play into electrification in the UK and maybe even across Europe and maybe even other technologies that you're seeing?
Well, I think that's quite a big topic to talk about. But one comment on that is that one argument against electrification has always been, okay, so your car is zero emissions, but where does the electricity come from? And of course, that's a very valid argument and makes sense. All you're doing is moving the pollution somewhere else. And nuclear energy answers that problem when it comes to the point of emissions, because it's a zero emissions generation. Of course, there are other challenges around nuclear, but the key point is that it does achieve a zero emissions full life cycle from generation to usage for these machines. So if the goal is zero emissions, it ticks the boxes. So yeah, the UK is making moves in that direction, as you mentioned. And I'm not sure about mentioning India. I think you touched on India about this, because a lot of electricity there is produced by coal power stations still. So the argument there is valid as well. That there's a good argument to move the pollution from the cities, which from my point of view, that's where the people are. So you do get a benefit from that. But looking at the overall global ecosystem, we're just moving the pollution to somewhere else. So yeah, we'll have to see how it goes out at each national organization or government rather will see what makes sense for their country.
Thanks for that. And Paolo, I know, we've talked about how the ZAPI Group is a leader in their transition to an all electric future. Can you touch just a bit, a little more on specifics of what your group is doing to foster that transition?
Yeah, yeah. I would add to what Garrett and Claes was just saying, that about the electrical energy. So we read that by 2025 the global energy consumption is projected to grow by 60%, and compared to 2010, in 2050 it will be doubled. So it means that the mission of ZAPI Group is to make this energy consumption as much as efficient as possible. So I mean, we are not discovering the wheel, no, but this process could be supported by a cross-functional approach, because, for example, we have completely different machines, from construction equipment to marine or material handling, that could have very similar difficulties and very similar solutions, regardless of the type of propulsion that they could have. So, for example, a common approach could be to reduce the noise impact, or to improve the range in full electric mode. So, of course, this is something which could be very obvious, and it is very obvious, but at Fury Consulting, we are using this experience, which comes from many different sectors and many different markets, to transfer this technology from a sector to another one. This normally is winning because it's a sort of open-minded way to solve the problem, no? And therefore, in this case, we feel that the partners, customers, is very positive toward this proposal. And we are talking about, again, how to be as much proactive as possible, no? So this is something that we are feeling strongly that it's already very much appreciated, but it will become even more appreciated in the future.
So, Sarah, you talked about ESG investing and how important that has been over the past few years for companies, and we keep hearing that it's going to become even more important as shareholders demand that companies decarbonize and embrace electrification. To get back to the original question, the impact of electrification on businesses over the next 5 to 10 years, do you see ESG being that main driver? Do you see, as Paolo mentioned, just trying to be more energy efficient?
No, your first point, I mean, ESG is a big driver. The transition to more electric is happening in response to that, partly from government regulation, as we've discussed, but partly because of consumer demand. Like, people are seeing the impact of climate change everywhere, and companies are responding. So I strongly believe this energy transition is happening. I do think other sources like nuclear and fuel cell also will play a part. And this adoption does vary by different markets and geographies, but it is happening, and ZAPI Group will be a part of making it happen. So I'm excited about the future and having a positive impact.
Well, thanks for that, Sarah. And we're going to get to a few questions here while we still have some time before the end of today's session. Wanted to start with what's the first step a business should take when considering electrification? And I'll just throw that open to the group, whoever wants to, any and all, if you want to take a stab at answering that.
Well, I would, I'll jump in on that one then and say that, so I think if we're talking about OEMs producing vehicles and machinery, they really need to start off and take a step back and look at the big picture and the full cycle for this vehicle, because, or this machine, the long term, all the way through to how they're going to charge, well, how they're going to charge it and the charging infrastructure, and then how they're going to service and support this in the aftermarket. So I think the first thing they need to do is really brainstorm the entire life cycle of this machine they're thinking of developing. So I would say that's step one, because I've been involved in several projects where that has not happened and things get missed, which then hinder progress.
Klaus, did you want to weigh in there?
Yeah, so I want to touch a little bit on the ESG here. So I think the circular economy is going to have an impact on our product development, but also on the OEM big machines. So we have a lot of requests now to have the service of remanufacturing as an example and service our products. And in the end, also make sure that they can be scrapped correctly according to all environmental regulations. And so I think that's an area where we will see more demands in the future, I guess.
I think the other answer, Darrell, is to call 4E Consulting as part of the ZAPI group and have them help work through your system solution so that you can consider electrification as an option.
Yeah.
I will just say, as an outside observer here, I definitely think that that's important. And Paolo, you can talk more about how 4E Consulting helps in that regard. But yeah, having the folks that I've talked to that want to take on electrification projects, and again going back to asking about the first step, a lot of times they're like, who do I even talk to? I don't even know.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that the first is to turn on the light on the path, no, to see where we are. I mean, where the OEM is, and to try to understand where it wants to come, because more often the manufacturer does not have a clear idea of which is the not only the difficulties but the path, and especially normally it's very hard to find a pioneer which wants to start regardless of the difficulties, then a follower which says, okay, if they are already started, we will do as well the same or similar exercise. So the first step, in my opinion, is again to support the OEM in making a sort of feasibility study to really understand what are the efforts that must be put in place.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about feasibility study. I think a lot of times people think, oh, I can just jump right into this, but you really do need to look at the solutions and the outcomes, at least have an idea of what that's going to look like before you move forward. And, in that, to sort of follow on that, how can decision makers improve awareness and educate consumers about the benefits of electrification? What are some of the best practices to go about doing that?
Well, I think that what business leaders and decision makers need to do is, first of all, educate the people around them and push the message downstream in the direction that they want to go, and just keep reinforcing the message. And I think another comment on that is that sometimes there's the debate about which direction to go in, electric or when to go in. I think and the pros and cons of IC vehicles versus electric. And I think now the debate should move on slightly to electrification is coming. The world is moving in a a direction towards sustainability, and electrification is a key part of that. So I think business leaders should now be just not debating about the pros and cons, should be looking for the opportunities in this inevitable future which we're heading towards. And I think that approach is the most sensible.
And is that something in your discussions with potential customers where you can basically say, this is happening, so it's happening whether you want to go in that direction or not, so you should probably look at going in that direction, and here are some of the reasons why you should be headed in that direction. Klaus, can you talk maybe about some of the discussions you've had with folks along those lines?
Well, if you think about the city bus application, there was drivers around the emissions, but also noise, so silent operations, so and drivability. So that there are other reasons to electrify than just emissions, and I think that's recognized also in construction equipment industry, where you can operate silently versus having a diesel engine running 24 hours and so on. So there are other values coming out which drives electrification now.
So Paolo touched on efficiency, and I'll just a quick story here. In the mountains of Colorado, and the U.S. government just put forth a lot of grants for school districts to use electric buses. And there's a school district up in the mountains of Colorado that said, yeah, we've had one electric bus. It's far more efficient than our diesel fueled buses. And the diesel has a tendency not to work well in extreme cold. And so obviously when you're at that high of an elevation during the winter, you're going to have a lot of cold temperatures. They're going to be able to now buy 3 new electric buses. And they talked about, yeah, there's an upfront cost to that. But in the long term, we're going to save a lot of money. And these buses are going to last a long time and be far more efficient than our diesel fueled buses. Can you, again, maybe whoever wants to take this, just touch on the efficiency aspect of moving toward electrification and how perhaps that gets lost sometimes when people say, oh, well, we're just trying to, cut emissions. But we're also looking at efficiency gains across the board in those cases, I would think.
Yeah, it's very easy to answer. Just 2 numbers. The thermodynamical efficiency of a diesel engine, the bursting class diesel engine does have maybe 38% of efficiency. It means that it converts fuel to mechanical energy with a 38%. With electrical powertrains, this efficiency is probably triple or surely more than double. It means that it's first of all it's a saving of money at first, and second, this for example for the truck, for the buses, another aspect is the longer lifetime of the electrical equipment compared to the traditional ones. Surely in Colorado they will face with frequent oil changes and engine oil changes and so on. Of course, with the electric components, this is drops to zero. There is almost no maintenance, and it's also possible to make in a much easier way the remote diagnostic. I'm coming from diesel world, so I know that to diagnose remotely or to diagnose a diesel fleet is pretty a nightmare, no? For electrical systems, it's pretty simple.
That really speaks to the total cost of ownership, Paulo, that came up earlier, right?
Yeah.
And seeing that in your example plus performance, Darrell.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, everyone. We're about at the top of the hour here and the end of today's session. Real quickly, if somebody can sum this up in about 10 to 15 seconds, what can we look for from ZAPI Group in the immediate future in terms of electrification? Any big projects that are being worked on or anything that you'd like to say before we sign off here? Klaus, maybe I'll throw that to you.
There are so many, so it's hard to pick one. But we clearly see that the adoption rate is taking on. So the electrification is coming for sure. So I maybe end with that. It's coming.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Thanks to our audience for attending today's session. We hope you gained some valuable insight from everyone, and particularly from the ZAPI group as ZAPI moves forward with supporting electrification globally. Again, thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the rest of this electrification conference. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Darrell.
Bye.
See everybody later.
See you. Thank you.